So I personally think a lot of financial problems or, often using an indicator of something, how much money you have in the bank is often just a symptom of broader, more important things that are actually happening in one's life. And um, I do attribute in much of the Western world now. I do think it's like a lot of like not psychological, but personal problems that are causing difficulties in people's lives to deal with money. And there's two sides to the story, right? It's one of them is and it's super common, more common is that people cannot accumulate any sort of savings or wealth or anything like that. And then on the other side, it's like people do that too much or they accumulate too much. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to say that, having too much money is um it's a problem. It's just that people don't know how to give or what to do. They often what goes hand in hand is that if somebody is a really, really good saver, it gives them kind of, um, strength inside or gives them a feeling of security, which makes them choose assets that are far too, um, that are not risky enough, right? And then they end up, you know, kind of stalling. They can save money, but they can't figure out how to do that. And then, but on the other side, which is a lot more common, is that most people are, you know, they have a difficulty seeing the long term, right? And I don't necessarily like the term of short-sighted because I think that that is like it's almost pejorative now, but it's just basically they have often, I think, in my own view, and this is my own independent assessment of the world. Um, um, my view is that they often just lose hope and they don't see the connection between little tiny steps that are often very grueling and very difficult. And the little tiny steps and doing that repeatedly for decades, particularly at the beginning, it seems like it's very difficult to do it. That they don't see that these little steps kind of add up over time and they don't turn into something that is enormous, right? So, um, now the reason why I say it's more of a feature to do with, either the individual or their social surroundings or, um, maybe it's even family. It may be a little bit of sort of things like community. But the reason why I say that, not, the broader, larger, whether it's a country, whether it's a state or a province or whatever, right? Like a sort of broader macro phenomenon, is because most countries now allow you, and there's enough examples of people doing spectacularly well in most countries around the world. And spectacularly well is like they've saved by the time they're 65 years old. So many people don't realize this, but the average savings rate, and you can look up this number, it's, for people in America, and this is true probably in most countries. The average savings rate by the time you get to 65, and depending what number that you look at, right? It all kind of varies. Um, I've seen, the median savings rate, which is 50% of the people, have about $100,000 to their name. That's on the, I think that's, I've seen it like less than that, like 80, 90. And then I've seen, like, depending on how you measure it, maybe a couple hundred. Um, you know, but in the grand scheme of things, if you sort of factor in at 65, even if you had $500,000 to your name at the age of 65 to live off of that for another 35 years, that is not a lot of money, right? Like that is still kind of not necessarily, you're not living high off the hog by any means, right? Like that sort of saying. So what I'm getting at is that if you kind of just look at it, it's very difficult for most people to either save or to spend and to give in a healthy way. It's very difficult. And we can do this. There are people that do it, and it's not because of, I think what the myth is that, either people are born into wealth. These are like really strong myths, and they're just, if you look at the evidence, it's just a myth debunked so many times, right? Like we think it's inheritance. Um, we think it's like they won some sort of quote unquote lottery, whatever, that genetic lottery or otherwise, right? They got a whole bunch of money, or that they are athletically inclined, or they have a voice or beauty that allows them to accumulate wealth spectacularly in a short amount of time, or they actually win a lottery and they win a they win $10 million, right, from playing, the actual lottery. But all of these things are just not true at all, right? The average person that does spectacularly well are really, really, really average, right? There's the best book, and this is why I'm a big fan of actually Dave Ramsey. Uh, in a weird way, I can't I can't even a lot of times because it kind of gets mixed with very strong messages of, you know, uh, religious leanings and things like that, that I just, frankly, I just don't resonate with it. But, but all of that is, there's really strong financial wisdom between that. And I think it's a Stanley guy that did like analysis of millionaires in America. Um, I think it was from the University of Georgia that did this, and Dave Ramsey did this with kind of like not a real, scientific um, study, but looked at all the millionaires that existed in America, which I think is actually a great representation. And every single one, it was something like 99%, were just normal people accumulating wealth over time, right? And doing this, and these quote unquote normal people, right? Or everyday people, as he likes to call it, um, they're they're just doing their thing, and they're doing it slowly and steadily, and they're figuring this out on their own often. Um, so what I'm getting at here is that if you really want to move the needle in your life, you often have to work on these things that prevent you from seeing the bigger picture, or allow you to go, if it's difficulty of saving money, often it's you've lost hope, right? Like you literally have lost hope, and you can't see the connection with the longer term picture. Um, that there is this bigger thing. And I think that is a massive, massive problem in our society today, is that the number, just people losing hope on where they would like to go and what they would actually do. And they've lost hope in things that we know that actually do real well for accumulating wealth and prosperity, things like education, right? Like getting a good education, a solid education, and something that we know has a return on investment, right? Like, um, things like losing hope in the family, right? Like family dynamics are hard. They're not easy in any sort of way. There is a lot of complications that happen with it that are not obvious. Um, people do get into things like divorce and things like that make it very difficult to accumulate wealth. So all of that is a reflection of, people just losing some form of hope. And then on the other side, I think it's almost very similar in that the accumulating wealth, right, and having wealth that you can't put into risky assets. It's a I'm kind of afraid of the world kind of belief, right? Like that it's scaredy, like, a little bit of a scaredy sort of response that you get. And all of those require, like, trust me, and I'm talking to myself here, talking to my junior self here that's 10 years younger than me. It just requires a tremendous amount of working on yourself and remembering that it does work, right? The formula of getting a good education, continuously reinvesting in yourself and other people, um, being kind and generous, it does work. It's just an extraordinarily long run play that you never see what the effects actually are in the moment, right? It's really, really challenging. But if you stick with it and you kind of push away all of the nonsense of people doing short sighted things around you, um, the sort of the stuff that eats away at you, if you push that away and you get back up and you do it again, something magical happens. It just requires you to get back up and do it again. Right. And that's the magic, is that challenging part of getting back up and doing it again, no matter what is happening to you and how people are treating you. And doing that for an extraordinarily long period of time really does move the needle. And it does give you something magical at the end of it. I don't want to disclose too much with my own family, but we have done okay. Um, we're doing okay, and we will continue to do okay based on this recipe of just just being a good person, focusing um on on the long term as opposed to the short term, and fighting against the world repeatedly of trying to spread the good message of good stuff, right? And the message that the world sends you is complete opposite of that. But you know what these good things are. That's the thing that is baffling. It's been around for thousands of years. You know what these are. Treat other people nicely. Education does matter. We've known that for 400, 500 years now. The education is the great equalizer as much as we can. Be frugal but generous. All of these kind of simple things that deep down inside, what the actual answer is. And, just keep doing those things. If you start feeling panicky, calm down and take one little tiny step every day. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.